Well, hello folks. This video today is going to cover the plant you see in center screen, which is curry. Now, if you go to a nursery and you tell them you want to buy a curry plant, more than likely they're going to give you a poisonous plant, the incorrect plant. I'm not talking about that one. I am talking about the curry that you use for culinary purposes. They are not easy to grow in North Texas. The number one reason is that you have to provide them shelter during the winter. So this is not a permaculture video because you cannot grow these using permaculture methods in North Texas. They will have to remain in a pot, and you will have to shelter them over the winter. So let's talk about some of the sheltering a little bit. 40 degrees is basically the cutoff for these plants. Below 40 degrees, they start to get damaged. Now, I don't really like to let my plants go below 50 degrees. And the reason why is once it starts dipping below 50 degrees, especially combined with that lower sun angle during the fall and winter, the plant will start to go dormant. In its natural environment, it does actually dip down pretty chilly at night. Where it grows natively. And so this plant does have a dormancy cycle. As a matter of fact, you can see the leaves starting to turn yellow, actually, because I have left this out here. It got down to about 48, 47 degrees. In fact, I have actually left these plants out here as low as 38 degrees, but they were in a microclimate, so it's probably a little bit warmer than that. But I would not advise that. It did not look very good after that. So if you want to follow my advice, I would say absolutely don't let the temperature drop below 40 degrees for these plants. And you probably don't want to let it drop below 50. Now, if you let it drop below 50, like I said, it's just going to go dormant. The plant won't necessarily die, but then you have to keep it relatively chilly, because if you put it somewhere where it starts to warm up, it can actually make the plant come out of dormancy. And if you do that too soon, it's really not good for the plant. So it's probably best to at least for me, it's easier to manage to keep them from going dormant. So with that said, I don't let them stay outside below 50 degrees. So if you have a passively heated greenhouse, I want to make sure I specify passively heated greenhouse. I personally don't think that that's going to be good enough to keep these alive. Just a couple years ago, maybe a year or so ago, we had winter temperatures at 0 degrees Fahrenheit for many, many hours during the night. It's actually what killed my avocados because we had rolling blackouts and everything. So I don't think you can really depend on a electrically powered greenhouse unless you have solar power or some other of your, something else providing your own electricity source. So if you have a passively heated greenhouse, you can increase and I'm mainly talking about nighttime temperatures in the greenhouse. You can do lots of things that will help keep the temperature elevated well into the night. But if you have a 0 degree winter, I doubt very seriously you're going to have a passively heated greenhouse that's 50 degrees warmer in the middle of the night at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Maybe you can. I have seen some ways to heat a greenhouse using compost. Some of those methods might work, but it takes a long time to set it all up, test it out, and you really want to test it. You want to make sure that those temperatures don't drop below a certain amount, and so you need ambient temperatures to cooperate. You need the weather to actually get very cold so you can test out your compost passively heated system. When you factor all that in, I think it's just better to, and probably a lot easier to just shelter these in an environment with electrical or some other type of artificial heating. So what I use is my house. And the reason why I'm making this video is because it's become unmanageable. So I'll go into some of that a little bit because I'm running out of room. So these two individuals were the first ones that I started with, and I would guesstimate they're about 3 foot tall. Not, well, at least the one this one right here is about 3 foot tall, not counting the pot that it's in. And I'm going to try to keep it about that tall. So if you're going to bring it into an indoor location, well, now you have to have artificial lighting. because these things, they do like full sun. Now, let me make a comment about full sun. I've said this in my other videos, but almost nothing in this area of Texas likes full sun. When they say full sun on the instruction packets for seeds and stuff, I don't think they're talking about this area. Because if you give a lot of plants full sun, a lot of plants that claim that they like full sun, if you give them full sun in the middle of a Texas summer, especially like the one we just had with a stage 5 drought, your plants are going to die. And what I've noticed with curry is that they like to have glancing rays of sun. So we're talking morning rays, evening rays. But they don't like the 114 degree noon August Texas sun. They will shrivel up, they will die. So keep that in mind if you're growing these. They do like full sun, but when you bring them in the house, they just because they don't like the intense Texas noon summer sun doesn't mean that they don't like to have a substantial amount of sunlight. These get about 8 hours or so a day, where I usually keep them. But when you bring them in the house, when you're dealing with grow lights, you're going to be on AC current usually, which means if you run your light for 10 hours to a plant, that's like only 5 hours, because alternating current is basically going off and on so fast the human eye can't detect it, but a plant can. So if you're growing with grow lights, you basically have to, if you want 8 hours of sunlight, you have to have the grow light on for 16 hours, basically. So it can get costly growing these under lights, and the bigger and bigger they get, you need better and better lights, more and more space. So I think now you're probably starting to get a sense as to why these are becoming unmanageable. So I have to keep I'm going to obviously keep them, but I'm going to have to keep a limited inventory. The good news is, if you're trying to make money, these plants are prolific seeders, and they're extremely easy to germinate. At least they are for me. And I'll discuss all the life cycle and growing and all the particulars about this plant. So let's see here. If there's anything else I need to discuss about growing the plant, pruning. You don't want to prune these for about their first 3 years of life. You don't want to go trimming them. A lot of young trees are like that within their first year. Like you don't want to prune them really. But with trees after that, you can usually prune them and totally get away with it. But what I've noticed with these things is that the first 3 years you really don't want to be pruning it. You just want to let it grow and create a really healthy root base. Right now they are in 2-gallon pots, and I'm going to try my best to keep them there as long as possible. I just potted those up in the spring. So probably another year or so, I'll be potting those up into a 3-gallon. I'm going to try to not go much bigger than 3-gallon, and we'll see how that goes. I can do some root pruning and I can keep the leaves pruned, and I often do. You can actually see right here where I've just pruned it for a dish that I cooked the other night. I wish I had smell-o-vision, because it just smells absolutely delicious. And you can see these leaves are kind of sagging here. Normally they are really perky and they're just sticking right out like this, but with the colder temperatures they just don't like it. You get in the low 60s, you get into the 50s at night, and they won't die, but they're not going to grow nearly as vigorously. So when you prune them, like most herbs, you just prune it straight off the top. Don't come down here and cut leaves off, okay? Go to the top and always top it out. And what'll happen is it will just make the tree bush out, okay? It'll send up bud back and new shoots below. But if you do that in the first 3 years, all you do is hinder the growth of the plant. So that's my advice. Don't prune it for the first 3 years. Always top out the plant. You can see what, like right here, how I topped it out right there, and then it sent up this shoot here, and it becomes the new top. So that's how the tree grows. And it is I do believe it's a tree. It may be a shrub, but I believe in its native environment it gets like 12 feet or so. So I don't know if it's a small tree or a large shrub, but it's definitely a woody stemmed plant. And here's my other one. You can see it's got more tops, and this is something I've noticed. They do this. They send up their new shoots as well, straight out of the root. It's very common to see that. So I don't know if I'm going to leave it because it creates more tops for me to top out and get herbs. for growing my food, but I don't know if you should. What I do know is that if you go digging into the roots, you can actually separate these shoots and repot them and get a whole new plant out of it if you're careful. So keep that in mind. They flower for me about twice a year. They flower this time of the year, you can see right there. And I usually get a small paintbrush, like the kind that you would give a child in elementary school to do their painting, like a little hand brush. And I just use that to pollinate it if it's in the wintertime, because like I said, they'll be indoors. And during the spring, I don't know which pollinator does it, but they get pollinated on their own. So I don't usually do anything in the spring for the flowers. You can see quite pretty flowers. And they will produce fruit, and the fruit first comes out green and then slowly fattens and matures and turns purple. Now when it turns purple, that's when the fruit is ripe. And as far as eating the fruit, you can eat pretty much every part of this plant. I've never tried eating the roots, so I wouldn't do that if I were you. And you probably can eat the bark. I don't know if you can, so don't do it. Don't do anything, I say, actually. When you hear a guy with an accent like this, probably shouldn't listen to him. But I don't think that the bark has any problems. It's just, it's bark. You're not going to want to eat it. But I do know that all the leaves, the fruit, and even the flowers, I've eaten those with no issue. And I can't tell you if you'll have issues. You need to do your own research, but I have had no issue. Of course, I have magical powers, so you know how that works. So anyway, the fruits, they turn purple, and if you are wanting to grow these, there is a trick. You need to pick the fruits when they are like at perfect ripeness. Now, I'm going to make a little small journey to the front and show you some of my younger plants. You can see some of the results of growing from seed. So you want to pick the seed when it's the perfect ripeness. And unfortunately, I don't have any seeds to show you right now. But you can tell that if you leave them on, it only takes like a day or so for them to get too ripe. So it's actually kind of finicky on picking the fruit for seeding at the right time. But basically, you can tell when the fruit looks like, like anytime you pick a fruit at maximum ripeness, it looks, plump. It's not shriveled like a raisin. But if you leave it on there too long, it'll start to get slightly shriveled. If you pick it too early, you can tell there's a little bit of green on the fruit. It won't be all the way purple. So that's basically generally how I go about telling if the fruits are ready for the seed to be planted. So you can see down here, I have some of these plants, okay? And I think I've got about 10 of them of this size, okay? They're all very healthy, beautiful plants. Let's see here, they're probably about 8 inches, maybe some of them are 10 inches tall. The ones you're viewing here are about a year old, maybe a little bit over a year. They're in 1 gallon pots, and I intend to let them grow until their roots fill this 1 gallon. But at this size right here that you see, that right there is around $20 to $25. Now, it would not be in a pot this large. The root base is probably big enough for a 4-inch pot right now. And that runs around $20, $25 for a year-old small tree, basically. Which is, if you look it up, it's generally the rate you have to spend for most year-old trees that are of that size. But actually, since it's not a common plant, it's not easy to come across, not at least not in my area. It probably runs a little bit more than your average tree, but that should give you an idea of how much profit you could make from this. So you see here, I have a few trays of curry plants that I started from seed this spring. So as far as the cost, when it comes to curry, I actually do purchase soil. I get a very high grade, very well drained, very rich potting soil. And that's all I use for the curry, because they need extremely well drained soil to survive in our Texas summers. Okay. on these, on the seeds that I did this spring, you'll see that other than the cost of the soil and a little bit of water, there really isn't any cost because I'm using the sunlight. Now, like I mentioned, they do seed and flower in the winter, and if you're going to actually use those seeds and let them flower during the winter, you'll be sprouting during the winter, so you're going to have grow lights. So that increases the cost per unit because of the electricity that goes into growing them. But I've done the math. I don't have it with me, but I'm sure one day I'll do a video. It'll be nothing but math for people that want to see math. So, but for now, I can assure you that when you're selling these for $20 to $25, and only about 4 to 5 months at most out of the year are they using grow lights, the cost per unit doesn't eat into your profit so much that at that price point you won't make any money. You actually will make a pretty huge profit per unit, even with growing them indoors. So for a nursery plant, for a plant for your business to make money off of, I think it's an excellent choice. But if you're a permaculture purist, yeah, absolutely don't grow these, because you will not be able to permaculture these things in your landscape in North Texas. Just isn't going to work. They'll just die. So I think, let's see here if there's anything I'm forgetting. We covered the seeds and how ripe they look, how ripe they should look. Ah, yes. So when you pluck the fruit off the plant, there's that, I mentioned the purple flesh of the fruit growing around the seed. So all you do is just squeeze it like that, and the seed pops right on out of that fleshy fruit. When the seed pops out, you'll notice that the seed itself actually has what looks like a root connected to it already, even though there's been no germination. When you see that that little piece of root that you see attached to the seed, what I have noticed is that if you destroy that too much, you get less germination rates out of the seeds. So just keep that in mind when you're squeezing that flesh. Now, don't be finicky. Don't be afraid to pop that seed out of that flesh. Just keep in mind that when you see that, because the root is like stuck to the seed or whatever that structure is. Whenever you see that come out of there, just be a little careful with it once the seed pops out, and make sure that flesh is removed from the seed, because the flesh itself actually inhibits the seed from germinating. And then just drop the seed in soil. I don't know what the literature says on how deep to plant it, but what I've discovered is that the literature has you planting the seeds deeper than what I have success with. So I plant them a little bit more shallow, around a ½ inch, maybe a quarter inch, fairly shallow actually, into the soil. And then I actually just keep the little pots wet. Now, where did I get all these pots? Well, I've had these for about 8 years, these little plastic pots. So I usually reuse any pots. Like if I go buy any plants like I did years ago, if I have any plants shipped to me, I of course save everything and reuse everything. Every farmer should do that. Every farmer does do that if they're successful. So pop that seed out of there, put it in around a quarter inch to a ½ inch deep in the soil, and then keep the soil moist, not soaking wet. It actually is pretty touchy in terms of how moist. How to describe that on camera. Well, I would say roughly, if you're doing this in the summer and it's over 100 degrees outside and you have your pots outside, then that equates to basically putting water in the bottom of the tray around a ½ inch deep all around the tray every other day. Approximately that much water when you initially plant. Whatever that works out to. Just enough to keep the soil moist, really, not wet. And what I've noticed is I usually get a pretty, I would say, well above 75% germination rate like that. Another little quirk that I've noticed is, and I haven't seen any literature on this, when I plant the seeds, you can put one seed in a pot and it will actually sprout 2, sometimes 3 plants. And so when I've taken that, I thought maybe I just had 2 trunks, for instance. But when I went to go repot that plant, or those plants that were like that, I went digging into the roots and noticed that I was able to actually separate those plants with no problem, almost like the one seed I planted had multiple seeds in it. That's not the case if you look up the plant. It's not like one seed is actually, you know, like a compound seed or anything. It's not. It's just a singular seed. So why did that happen? I have no clue, but it does actually periodically happen. I would guess around 20%, 10 to 20% of my plants that I plant from seed will give me 2 plants out of 1 seed. So that's a bonus. So yeah, squeeze that flesh off, plant them about 1/4 inch deep, keep it moist. They'll come up usually for me, they come up actually fairly quick. In about a week, I will definitely, most of them will be germinated and sprouted. And then it's just a matter of making sure they have enough sun, and it's the same rules as I showed you on the big plants, glancing rays of sun. So on the microclimate, what you're seeing here, this fence is south. Actually, this direction is due south. So you can see that, maybe you don't know this right now, but right now it's well past noon, and you can see that the sun is just coming around just now, starting to give this bed sunlight. And this is the location that I've had the best results, you know, with my curry. Early morning sun, late evening or afternoon sun. Early morning sun is obviously better, but I think I may have mentioned in another video, almost my entire yard is on a northwest facing slope. So I don't have optimum locations for growing really anything. So if you have morning sun, you can get a good 6 to 8 hours in or even, you know, get like 6 hours of morning sun and then block out the noon sun and then get a few hours of afternoon sun. That's probably going to give you your best results growing the curry. Now, they do not like to be too wet. They actually do like to get dry. The top inch or so of soil, depending on the size of the pot, right? If you let the top inch or so of soil in this size pot get dry, you're going to kill the plant. But in this size pot, they actually prefer it. So about 1 inch, 2 inch, you know, go ahead and let that part get a little dry. Now, in the summertime, that does not apply. In the summertime, just what I've had success with is just keeping the soil moist every single day. They're going to need water. Okay, when you're dealing with 110 degrees, that's just the nature of the beast. You're pretty much going to have to water every day. And so that rule of how they like to stay, if you go online and you read any information about these, it'll say they actually like to get dry every once in a while, a little bit of dryness. But in the dead of summer, in this area of Texas, no, they do not like that. But outside of that season, they actually do. And if you let them get too wet, this is what happens. So you can see I let this one get too wet. I don't know if it's coming out on camera, but I'm now letting it dry out, and you can see that it's sending up shoots. Okay, this guy just lost everything, but he's got some shoots. So that's what happens if you let them get too wet, and it's actually pretty easy to let them get too wet. So that is my brain dump growing guide for curry. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'll put the genus and species in the description. I may annotate the video. And it's really important that you know the genus and species if you go to a nursery to buy these. Because if you just go to a nursery, and I've done this, I've gone to several nurseries and say, yeah, I want to buy a curry plant. I don't know what plant they're handing me, but it sure as heck is not this plant. And it's I've looked it up before, what they were handing me, and it's actually poisonous. So just be very careful if you're going to go buy curry. Don't use the common name. Ask for the genus and species. Verify that it's the right genus and species, especially in North Texas, because a lot of nurseries are not hip to this. And last but not least, just mention that what prompted me to even think about creating a video on just this one particular crop is that I quickly ran out of room. I have room in climate-controlled storage with grow lamps to fit the large curry under and a certain percentage of these smaller, younger plants. But I think I'm actually gonna be struggling this winter to rebuild my whole indoor lamp situation to be able to fit all of these in there. And then of course I have the sprouts from this year to put under there. So I'm running out of room, and probably be selling these next year. We'll see. Definitely will be selling these next year. I'm just going to have to make room, because by that time these will be much too large, and I'm gonna have to clear some space. I think I can probably only fit about 5 curry plants that are the size of the 2 larger ones. So I'm gonna have to cull these down Probably take about 3 or 4 more, and then the rest of them are going to have to be sold, given away, or something like that. So I wanted to make the video while I have an abundance, and to explain everything about it, and to also make that point that if you are going to grow this crop, it really doesn't take very long before you run out of room. So I think it's a good crop for a small business, for a nursery. There really isn't a lot of supply in North Texas for curry, like live curry plants. So, you know, it's I think that, and plus if you're going to grow it like I do because you love it, you know, then it's kind of a no-brainer. You know, you might as well. Although it is a hassle, you will run out of room, and if you try to expand too large, you're pretty much going to have to build a climate-controlled, electric-powered greenhouse to put, if you want to have a whole bunch of these, if you want a small forest. That's just the nature of the beast. Okay, folks, I hope y'all have a good one.